I brought flowers and Paris flight tickets to the office to surprise my husband for Valentine's Day. But the whole company was celebrating his engagement to the female CEO. My husband kissed her, then held up a diamond ring as the crowd cheered. I turned around and walked away. I instantly canceled the trip, froze all joint accounts, and withdrew my 83% share from the company, worth $558 million. 30 minutes later, my phone showed 152 missed calls. Then my doorbell rang. I did not open the door right away. I stood in the hallway of our house in Westport, Connecticut, with my coat still on, my purse hanging from my shoulder, and the dead Valentine flowers lying on the kitchen island behind me. The roses had been wrapped in thick cream paper with a red satin ribbon, the kind of overdone romantic arrangement Jake always said he loved because it made him feel old school. I had bought them that morning from a little flower shop near the train station, along with a card I had written by hand, because after 14 years of marriage, I still believed love deserved effort. The Paris tickets had been tucked inside that card. First class, Friday evening departure. 4 nights at a small hotel near Saint-Germain, the same neighborhood where Jake and I had spent our honeymoon before his suits became custom, before his name appeared in business magazines, before people stood up a little straighter when he entered a room. That morning, I had imagined his face when he saw them. By noon, I had seen his face while kissing another woman. The doorbell rang again. Longer this time. Then came Jake's voice, muffled through the heavy front door. "Emma, please, open the door." I looked down at my phone. Another call came in from him, lighting up the screen with the photo I had never changed. Jake in a navy sweater, smiling at me from the deck of our first house, before the gray at his temples, before the expensive watch, before ambition hardened into entitlement. I let it ring. "Emma, I know you're in there," he said, his voice cracking. "Please, just talk to me." Talk. It was strange how small that word sounded after what I had just witnessed. At 11:42 that morning, I had walked into the lobby of Harlow Reed Technologies with a bouquet in one hand and a slim black envelope in the other. The building was all glass and sunlight, polished concrete floors, living green walls, and a reception desk that looked more like a boutique hotel than a corporate headquarters. I had not visited often in the past few years, partly because I preferred my privacy, and partly because Jake had slowly trained everyone to think of the company as his world, not ours. Still, I expected someone to recognize me. Maybe not the new receptionist, a young woman with perfect eyeliner and a headset, but surely someone from operations, someone from finance, someone who had been there long enough to remember when the company was just 12 people in a rented office above a dental clinic in Stamford. Instead, the receptionist barely glanced up. "Are you here for the celebration?" she asked brightly. I smiled, thinking Jake had arranged some Valentine's office event for the staff. He was good at those things. The visible gestures, the champagne, the speeches, the staged generosity. "I suppose I am," I said. She pointed toward the atrium. "They're just getting started." I heard the applause before I saw the crowd. There must have been 200 employees gathered under the skylight, clustered around a small platform decorated with white roses and gold balloons. Someone had brought in a violinist. Someone else was recording on a phone. The company's logo glowed behind the stage, and beneath it stood Amanda Blake, the new CEO Jake had hired 18 months earlier. I had met her once at a charity dinner. She was brilliant, polished, and younger than me by nearly a decade, with a sharp blonde bob and the kind of calm confidence that made people confuse beauty with competence, even though she had both. Jake stood beside her. He was smiling in that public way of his, wide and practiced, one hand resting at his jacket button, as if he had been born under a spotlight. Then he dropped to one knee. The room erupted. For 1 second, my mind refused to translate what my eyes were seeing. I thought perhaps it was a skit, a company joke, some ridiculous morale-building stunt. But then Amanda covered her mouth with both hands, tears filling her eyes, and Jake opened a velvet box. The diamond caught the light. The same cut I had once told him I loved. People cheered as Amanda nodded. Jake slid the ring onto her finger. Then he stood, cupped her face, and kissed her. Not a nervous kiss, not a mistake, not something confused or accidental. A man does not kiss another woman like that unless he has already practiced betraying his wife in his mind 1,000 times. I felt the bouquet slip lower in my hand. A woman near me whispered, "Can you believe it? They're perfect together." Perfect. That was the word that finally made Jake turn. His eyes found mine across the atrium, and for half a second, all the noise in the room seemed to fold into itself. His smile vanished. His face drained. He knew I had seen everything. And still he did not come to me. He did not say my name. He did not step off that platform. Amanda followed his gaze and looked at me with polite confusion, the kind a hostess gives to a guest she cannot place. "I'm sorry," she mouthed, almost kindly. "Do we know each other?" That was when I understood. Jake had not just cheated. He had erased me. I turned around before my dignity could bleed out in front of strangers. No one stopped me as I walked back through the lobby. The receptionist smiled again, still clueless, still cheerful, and said, "Have a great Valentine's Day." I made it to the parking garage before my hands started shaking. I sat in my car with the flowers on the passenger seat and the Paris envelope in my lap, and I listened to the faint echo of applause still trapped in my ears. I could have screamed. I could have stormed back in. I could have thrown those roses at his face in front of the whole company and given everyone the spectacle they were already halfway enjoying. But rage, when it becomes clean enough, gets quiet. I opened my phone. First I canceled Paris. Then I called the bank and froze every joint account that required mutual review under our marital asset agreement. Then I called our attorney, Martin Keller, who had been my father's lawyer before he became mine. "Emma?" he said, alarmed by my tone. "What happened?" "My husband just got engaged," I said, "to his CEO." There was a silence so complete I could hear him breathing. Then Martin said, "I'm on my way to the office." "No," I said, "start with the holding company." Another silence. "Are you sure?" I looked through the windshield at the elevator doors, half expecting Jake to burst through them, breathless and apologetic. He never came. "Yes," I said, "withdraw the full position." "Emma, that will trigger a capital event." "I know." "It will freeze their credit line." "I know." "It may collapse the pending acquisition." "Martin." He stopped talking. I pressed my thumb against the Paris envelope until the edge cut into my skin. "Do it." By the time I drove home, the first call came in. Then the second. Then 15. Then 50. By the time I reached the house, Jake had called 152 times. Now he was standing on our porch, ringing the bell like a man trying to wake the dead. "Emma," he said again, "please, I can explain." I walked to the door slowly and looked through the side window. He was still wearing the same suit. His tie was crooked now, his hair disheveled, his face shiny with sweat despite the February cold. Behind him, in the driveway, his black company car sat at an angle, as if he had abandoned it before it fully stopped. For the first time all day, Jake looked like a man who understood that consequences could move faster than excuses. I opened the door, only halfway. His eyes dropped to my face, then to my coat, then past me toward the kitchen, where the flowers sat like evidence. "Emma," he whispered, "it wasn't what it looked like." I stared at him, and for one terrible, almost funny moment, I realized that even now, he thought the betrayal was the problem. He had no idea the empire was already burning behind him. "Then tell me," I said calmly, "what exactly did it look like?" He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Behind him, his phone began ringing again. Not mine. His. He looked down at the screen, and whatever name appeared there made his face collapse. I knew before he said it. The board had found out. Jake looked down at his phone, and the color left his face so quickly it was almost satisfying to watch. Not satisfying in the loud, cruel way people imagine revenge should feel, but in a quieter way. The way a locked door feels satisfying after years of someone walking through it without knocking. He silenced the call without answering. "Emma," he said, stepping closer, "we need to talk inside." "No," I said. His eyes flicked toward the street. Our neighbors' houses sat behind bare maple trees, their porch lights glowing against the gray Valentine's evening. Westport was a town where people pretended not to notice things while noticing everything, and Jake knew that better than anyone. He had spent years cultivating the image of a generous husband, a visionary founder, a man who remembered birthdays and sent Christmas baskets to people he barely liked. Being seen begging on my porch did not fit the brand. "Please," he said, lowering his voice, "I made a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary," I said. "A mistake is missing a flight. You proposed to another woman in front of 200 employees." His jaw tightened. It got out of hand. I almost laughed. That was Jake's gift, and maybe also his curse. He could make any disaster sound like weather. A thing that happened. A thing that rolled in unexpectedly. A storm, not a choice. "When did it get out of hand?" I asked. "Before or after the ring?" He swallowed. Behind him, his phone started buzzing again. This time, he glanced at it and turned the screen away, but I saw enough. Martin Keller. My lawyer. Jake saw that I had seen. "What did you do?" he whispered. I leaned against the doorframe, and for the first time since walking into that glass atrium, my hands stopped shaking. "I protected what belongs to me." His expression changed then. The panic sharpened into calculation, and I recognized the look because I had seen it across conference tables for years, whenever a deal began moving in a direction he could no longer control. "Emma, you can't just pull capital like that," he said. "There are procedures. There are obligations." "There are clauses," I corrected, "and you sign them." He stared at me as if I had spoken in a language he used to understand, but had forgotten through arrogance. 14 years earlier, when Harlow Reed was nothing but a half-developed software platform, a folding table, and a name I had written on a legal pad at 2 a.m, Jake had not talked about obligations. Back then, he talked about dreams. He talked about building something that made hospital systems safer, that helped doctors track critical patient data faster, that kept small clinics from drowning in outdated software. He had charisma, and I had the architecture. He could sell a room, and I could build the thing he was selling. We were a good team once. That was the part people never understood about betrayal. It did not always begin with a villain and a victim. Sometimes it began with two exhausted people eating takeout on the floor of a rented office, laughing because the Wi-Fi had gone out again. Sometimes the person who destroyed you started as the person who believed in you when no one else did. My father had been the first investor, not because he trusted Jake, but because he trusted me. After he died, his shares moved into a family holding company, and over the years, through additional funding rounds, buybacks, and carefully structured agreements, that holding company came to control 83% of Harlow Reed. Jake knew this, of course. He had known it when he asked me to stay out of the public-facing role because, as he put it, investors are more comfortable when there's a single operational voice. He had known it when he convinced me that my privacy was an advantage, that I could guide strategy from the board level while he handled interviews, conferences, and champagne toasts. He had known it every time a magazine called him the founder, and I corrected no one because I told myself marriage was not a competition. But knowing a fact and respecting it were two very different things. "You're angry," he said, forcing softness into his voice. "I understand that. You have every right to be angry." "No," I said. "I had every right to know my husband was living as an unmarried man at work." His face flinched. "Good. Amanda didn't know," he said quickly. That surprised me, though I did not let him see it. She didn't know what. He looked toward the driveway, then back at me. About us. Not really. Not really, I repeated. I told her we were separated. The cold moved through me, clean and exact. I thought of Amanda's polite, confused smile, the way she had mouthed, "Do we know each other?" Not cruelly, not smugly, just genuinely unaware that the woman holding Valentine roses was the wife of the man she had agreed to marry. "You told her we were separated," I said, "while you slept in my bed every night." Jake closed his eyes. "Emma, while I hosted your mother for Thanksgiving." "I know." "While we renewed the lake house insurance together last month." "I know." "While you kissed me goodbye this morning." His eyes opened then, and for a moment I saw the man from the old days, the one who hated disappointing me, but he disappeared almost instantly beneath fear. "The board is overreacting," he said. "This can be managed." There it was. Not repaired. Managed. I stepped back from the doorway and picked up the black envelope from the console table. I had brought it from the car without thinking, and now I held it between two fingers. "These were for Paris," I said. His eyes dropped to the envelope. Something like grief crossed his face, but it came too late to matter. "I wanted to surprise you," I said. "I thought we needed a few days away. I thought you had been distant because of the acquisition, because of stress, because of everything you always said was temporary." "It was complicated," he said. "No, software integration is complicated. Marriage is difficult. Lying is simple." He looked at me then, wounded by the plainness of it. Another car turned onto our street. Jake instinctively stepped closer to the door, trying to hide from the headlights. I did not move. The lights passed. His phone buzzed again, then mine. I looked down and saw a message from Martin. "Emergency board meeting scheduled for 7:30 p.m. They are requesting your presence by video. Do not speak to Jake about corporate matters." I turned the phone toward Jake just long enough for him to see the first line. His mouth parted. "Emma, don't do this tonight." "I didn't do it tonight," I said. "You did." He ran a hand through his hair, and suddenly he looked older than 46. Not distinguished, just tired and cornered. "If I'm removed, the company destabilizes," he said. "People lose jobs, good people, people with mortgages, families." "That is the first honest thing you've said," I replied. "And it should have mattered to you before you turned their workplace into your engagement party." He had no answer. For years, Jake had relied on movement. If a conversation became uncomfortable, he walked into another room. If a question got too precise, he took a call. If I asked about loneliness, he blamed deadlines. But now he was standing on a porch with nowhere to go, and the life he had carefully divided into separate rooms had finally become one house. "Does Amanda know now?" I asked. His silence answered. I nodded. "Then go explain it to her." "Emma, please." I began closing the door. He reached out, not touching me, but close enough that I saw the tremor in his hand. "Are you divorcing me?" I paused. The word should have felt dramatic. Instead, it felt administrative, like naming a document that had already been drafted by years of small humiliations I had chosen not to count. "Yes," I said. His face crumpled, but only for a second. Then fear took over again. "And the company?" I looked at him through the narrowing space between us. "The company," I said, "was never yours." Then I closed the door, locked it, and stood there while he knocked once, twice, then stopped. A minute later, his car door slammed. Through the window, I watched him sit behind the wheel without starting the engine, shoulders bent, phone pressed to his ear. I did not know whether he was calling Amanda, the board, or another lawyer. For the first time in 14 years, I did not need to know. At 7:30, I sat at my kitchen table in a navy sweater with a glass of water beside me and Martin's face glowing on my laptop screen. One by one, the board members joined the call, each looking stunned, careful, and professionally frightened. Then Jake appeared. He was no longer on my porch. He was in his office, beneath the framed magazine cover that called him the man who reinvented medical data. His camera turned on. He looked directly at me, and every person in that meeting finally understood that the woman they had treated like a footnote was the only reason they still had a company to save. The board meeting began without the usual small talk. No one asked about anyone's weekend. No one commented on the weather. Even the company's general counsel, who had a habit of opening difficult meetings with an awkward joke, simply cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. Jake sat alone in the executive conference room, the skyline of Manhattan glowing behind him through the floor-to-ceiling windows. His tie was gone. The top button of his shirt was undone. For a man who had spent years mastering every public appearance, he suddenly looked remarkably ordinary. Martin sat beside me at my kitchen table. "Emma," he said quietly before anyone else spoke, "answer only what you're asked." I nodded. The chairman of the board adjusted his glasses. "We've received notice," he began carefully, "that Carter Family Holdings has withdrawn its equity commitment and suspended all discretionary capital support, effective immediately." No one looked at Jake. Everyone looked at me. "Mrs. Carter," the chairman continued, "can you confirm the notice is authentic?" "Yes." "And that Carter Family Holdings remains the beneficial owner of 83% of Harlow Reed Technologies?" "Yes." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Several directors had known the ownership structure on paper, but ownership documents and reality were different things. For years, Jake had become the face of the company. Employees quoted him. Investors photographed him. Reporters called him the founder. Somewhere along the way, people had begun believing visibility meant ownership. Jake had believed it most of all. He leaned toward his camera. "Emma, please don't make permanent decisions based on today's emotions." Martin placed a hand lightly over my legal pad, reminding me not to respond emotionally. "I made no decisions today," I answered calmly. "I executed rights that have existed for years." Jake closed his eyes for a second. The chairman turned toward him. "Jake, is there anything you need to disclose before we continue?" A long pause. Finally, Jake spoke. "My personal situation has become complicated." "Complicated," one director repeated flatly. Another board member, Linda Foster, folded her hands on the table. "Did you represent yourself inside this company as unmarried?" Jake hesitated. "Yes." "Were you, in fact, married?" "Yes." "Were members of executive leadership aware of your marriage?" "No." The room became painfully quiet. No one cared that Jake had been unfaithful. They cared that the CEO had concealed material personal facts while conducting a highly public relationship with another executive inside the company. Corporate governance had just become a legal issue. The general counsel spoke next. "Given these disclosures, I recommend placing Mr. Carter on immediate administrative leave pending an independent investigation." Jake looked directly into the camera. "You can't be serious." The chairman sighed. "I wish we weren't." By 8:30 that evening, the news had not reached the media. But inside Harlow Reed, everyone knew. Corporate rumors traveled faster than any press release. Someone noticed Jake leaving the executive floor carrying a cardboard box. Someone else noticed Amanda's office door staying closed. Security quietly deactivated Jake's executive access card. The photographs spread through private employee group chats within minutes. No one posted anything publicly. Not yet. The next morning, I woke after barely 3 hours of sleep. For the first time in years. Jake wasn't beside me. The silence felt unfamiliar. Not lonely. Just unfamiliar. I made coffee, fed our aging golden retriever Murphy, and stood by the kitchen window watching children wait for the school bus. Life outside continued exactly as it always had. That realization grounded me. My world had shattered. Everyone else's had not. At 9:15, Martin arrived carrying 2 thick folders. "The banks have responded." I invited him inside. "They've suspended the acquisition financing," he said. "I expected that." They're asking whether Carter Family Holdings intends to remain invested after restructuring. I looked at the folders without opening them. What did you tell them? The truth. He smiled slightly. I told them the owner still believes in the company. That surprised me. He noticed. You never wanted to destroy Harlow Reed. No. You wanted to stop one man from pretending he owned it. Exactly. People always imagined revenge as burning everything down. Sometimes revenge meant refusing to let someone keep stealing credit for what you built. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Amanda Blake. I stared at her name for several seconds before answering. Hello? Her voice sounded nothing like it had during board meetings. It was quieter, almost fragile. I know I probably have no right to call you. No, I answered honestly, you probably don't. She accepted that. I didn't know. I believe you. She exhaled sharply, as though she'd been holding her breath all morning. He told me he'd been separated for almost 2 years. I know. He said the divorce paperwork was delayed because of business assets. I know. He showed me an apartment lease. That made me pause. What apartment? Silence. Then Amanda answered. He rented an apartment downtown. I stared at the wall. Jake had rented another apartment. Not to live in. To support a lie. Every late meeting. Every overnight strategy session. Every business trip that ended too late to drive home. There had always been somewhere else. Not because he needed another life. Because he needed evidence of one. I feel sick, Amanda whispered. You should. I never would have. I know. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. For the first time since Valentine's Day, I heard genuine remorse from someone connected to this disaster. I believe you're sorry, I said. But sorry doesn't undo what happened. No. She paused. Will you ever forgive me? I looked out the window again. I don't know you well enough to forgive you. She didn't argue. Instead, she quietly said, That's fair. Late that afternoon, Martin called again. We found something. His tone immediately caught my attention. What? Old authorization records. I drove to his office. He spread dozens of documents across the conference table. Expense approvals. Equity transfer forms. Investment authorizations. At first glance, they looked ordinary. Then Martin pointed towards several signatures. They're yours. I frowned. No. They're excellent copies. My stomach tightened. I never signed these. I know. He slid another document beside them. My authentic signature. The difference became obvious. Tiny. Almost invisible. But obvious. Jake hadn't simply betrayed our marriage. Someone had been forging my signature on corporate documents. For years. Martin folded his hands. We're having forensic analysts review every executive authorization from the last 5 years. How many? Hundreds. I slowly sat back in my chair. Every emotion I'd carried since Valentine's Day shifted. Until that moment. I believed this story was about infidelity. Now it was becoming something much larger. Corporate misconduct. Fraud. Possible criminal exposure. Martin looked at me carefully. Emma. Yes? You need to prepare yourself. For what? If the investigation confirms what we suspect. He paused. Jake isn't just going to lose his marriage. I finished the sentence for him. He's going to lose everything. Martin didn't answer. He didn't need to. The evidence spread across the conference table already had. As I stared at the forged signatures bearing my name, I realized something that chilled me far more than the engagement party ever had. Jake hadn't crossed one line. He had been crossing lines for years. Valentine's Day hadn't created the disaster. It had merely exposed it. The next 48 hours moved with the cold precision of a machine. Martin brought in a forensic accounting firm from New York, the kind that did not ask unnecessary questions and did not use dramatic language unless a document deserved it. They set up inside a locked conference room at Harlow Reed, badge access restricted, blinds drawn, laptops open beside bankers' boxes of old authorizations, board packets, wire approvals, and executive compensation files. I did not go to the office. That was deliberate. If I walked into that building too soon, people would turn the investigation into a personal war between a wife and a husband. I wanted no gossip, no hallway whispers about revenge, no excuse for Jake to claim I was acting from heartbreak rather than evidence. So I stayed home, answered questions through Martin, and let the professionals do what Jake had always underestimated. They followed paper. By the third day, they found the pattern. It was not one forged signature, or even a handful. It was a system. My name had been used to authorize temporary executive loans, approve inflated travel reimbursements, and fast-track vendor contracts tied to people Jake knew personally. None of it was reckless enough to scream fraud at first glance. That was what made it dangerous. It was polished, layered, and wrapped in corporate language clean enough to pass through busy hands. But lies age badly. Every document had a timestamp. Every approval had metadata. Every transfer left a trail. At 6:12 on Thursday evening, Martin called me. "Emma," he said, "we have enough." I was standing in my laundry room, folding one of Jake's white dress shirts because habit is sometimes the last part of love to die. I looked down at the shirt in my hands, at the monogram on the cuff, and suddenly felt foolish for touching it. "Enough for the board?" I asked. "Enough for the board, enough for civil action, and possibly enough for referral to federal authorities." I closed my eyes. For one brief second, I wished the truth had been smaller. Then I remembered Jake kissing Amanda under the skylight while 200 people applauded a lie. "Then send it," I said. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the next morning. This time, Jake was not invited as chief executive. He was invited as the subject of the investigation. Amanda appeared on the video call from her office, pale but composed. She had resigned temporarily from all decision-making connected to Jake, and the board had accepted. She did not defend herself. She did not blame me. When the chairman asked whether she had known Jake was married, she answered clearly. "No, he told me he had been separated for 2 years." "And did he ever disclose that Mrs. Carter controlled the majority ownership of the company?" Amanda looked down for a moment. "No, he told me his wife had no operational involvement and that the ownership structure was old family paperwork." The phrase landed heavily. Old family paperwork. That was what Jake had reduced my father's investment, my years of labor, and my silence to. Then the forensic accountants began. They did not raise their voices. They did not need to. They showed signatures, metadata, wire approvals, lease agreements, and executive expense records. They showed the apartment Jake had rented downtown and classified as a strategic client hospitality suite. They showed jewelry purchases labeled as investor relations gifts. They showed private travel booked through corporate accounts. Weekends Amanda had believed were business retreats because Jake had surrounded every lie with just enough paperwork to make it look legitimate. Amanda covered her mouth once. Only once. Jake sat frozen. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded thin. "This is being taken out of context." The lead investigator, a woman named Denise Lowell, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Carter, metadata does not have context. It has timestamps." No one smiled. But I almost did. Jake tried again. "I had authority to act on behalf of the company." "You had operational authority," Denise said. "You did not have authority to forge Mrs. Carter's signature." His eyes moved to me then, and for the first time, there was anger beneath the fear. "You're enjoying this," he said. I felt every face on the call turn toward me. I could have denied it. Instead, I told the truth carefully. "No, Jake, I am not enjoying this. I am surviving it." That silenced him. By noon, the board voted unanimously to terminate Jake for cause, revoke all unvested equity compensation, and refer the findings to outside counsel for civil recovery. His name would be removed from all active company materials until the matter was resolved. Amanda would remain on administrative leave pending completion of her own ethics review, though preliminary findings showed she had been deceived rather than complicit. It was not dramatic. There was no shouting. No one threw a glass. The revenge came in signatures, votes, and locked accounts. And somehow, that made it feel more complete. That afternoon, Amanda asked to meet me in person. I almost refused. Then I thought of the look on her face when she learned about the apartment, and I realized there was one conversation left that Jake did not get to control. We met at a small coffee shop in Fairfield, far from the office and far from anyone who might recognize us. Amanda arrived first. She wore no makeup, or very little,